money back guarantee on every single souvenir football that they sell. It's the coolest present that they'll open that day, guaranteed. There's nothing worse than trying to find the right gift for somebody that already has everything. Whether that special present is for a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan or an Alabama Crimson Tide backer, maybe Gramps is a lifelong Dallas Cowboys supporter, or your brother-in-law is in LSU Tiger territory. Know a member of the Baylor Alumni Association? Is there a better Father's Day gift for someone who's a Kansas City Chiefs fan? Send them the coolest present they'll open that day, guaranteed. Now, if your favorite pro team is the Buffalo Bills or those Minnesota Vikings, well, we're sorry about that. Also, if you're a New Mexico State Aggie or a Tulane Green Wave alum, not much they can do. After all, the name isn't nice effort, you had a pretty good season footballs.com. The name is championshipfootballs.com. The coolest present they'll open that day, guaranteed.
Your client's going away for 10 years. Unless we swap first-round picks.
Fantasy football draft season is upon us. It's time for you to put the PP back in the PPR league with the sponsors of today's show, Manscaped. The leaders in below-the-waist grooming just launched the new Performance Package 4.0. Don't neglect your balls like the Packers front office has been neglecting Aaron Rodgers. Join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY. This will help you tame that Troy Polamalu in your pants. And good news for our international listeners. Their life-changing products are now available in Canada, the UK, across Europe, Australia, South Africa, and Singapore. All with the 20% off and free international shipping when you use the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY today. One of the best sponsors of the show is named Symbol. That's SIMBULL. Symbol, where Wall Street meets sports gambling in this innovative app. The Symbol brings the fun of being able to play for the long term by purchasing, selling, and trading stocks of your teams. When your teams win, you win a payout. Well, when they lose, you don't lose money. The value of your team's share is all that matters, and it's easy to use. Just download the Symbol app on your Play Store and use the promo code MDSFantasy for a $10 deposit of at least $10 or more. Join the fun of investing in your team for the long haul, where the sportsbook edge is put back into your hands as the player. For the latest and most fun in sports gambling, download Symbol and again, use the promo code MDSFantasy for your $10 deposit bonus today. Do you have trouble waking up in the morning? Well, not anymore, because Invader Coffee is here to make you look forward to that morning sunshine. Rated one of the best, smoothest tasting coffees on the market today. Originating out of Texas, this rare coffee product is able to reach new heights in quality from its air roasting process, creating coffee beans with the most robust and smooth flavor you will ever find. So make your mornings more enjoyable by going to invadercoffee.com and use the promo code BELLYUP for 15% off your next purchase. Again, that is promo code BELLYUP for 15% off of your Invader Coffee purchase today at invadercoffee.com. Hey there, sports fans. This is Dan Mater, the host of the MD's Fantasy Football Show, and I am so happy and proud to announce our availability on the Unhinged Radio Network. All you gotta do is go to unhingedsn.airtime.pro to catch us on Sundays at 12 to 1 p.m. or Monday, Thursday, and Fridays from 6 to 7:30 p.m. or on Tuesdays at 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern. That's right, we are available 5 days a week on the Radio Unhinged Network, now powered by Belly Up Sports, giving you the best fantasy football information you could possibly get out there to give yourselves the MDNation, the edge in your fantasy football leagues to become champions today. So check out Unhinged Radio and listen to sports talk in a whole new way today.
This is the MD's Fantasy Football Show with Dan Mader, giving you the X's and O's of all things fantasy.
Hear he. Welcome back, MD Nation, to the MD's Fantasy Football Show. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader. Joining us here on social media at BellyUpMDFF Show on YouTube, the MD's Fantasy Football Show. Please subscribe. And of course, on the Unhinged Radio Network, which we are live 5 times a week. Sunday from 12 to 1. Monday, 6 to 7:30. Tuesday, 7 to 8. Thursdays and Fridays, 6 and 7:30, and will be that way all throughout the fantasy football season. So make sure you tune in on the unhinged sn.airtime.pro. And not just with this show, but for any of the shows, because it's a 24/7 network, and it's one of the best sports streaming radio shows that you could possibly find out there, free of charge to you. Just bringing you excellent content all throughout. But today you're watching and listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show, and we're going over our best bets for the upcoming NFL season. Now, it's just me here today, and just get you guys used to it, because this is what's going to be throughout the season. Chris will be joining us on Thursdays and on our Saturday night streams from 9:30 to 10:30 at BellyUpMDFF Show on social media and on YouTube. And that show will be our DFS contest along with our bets each and every week. But those are the 2 shows he's going to be on. Otherwise, we're getting back to how this show started. Me behind a mic, hosting you guys, giving you the best entertaining information I possibly can for your fantasy football purposes to help you guys win championships. And this year, we're going to be putting an emphasis on betting as well, because we don't want you guys just to win championships. We want you guys to win money. To me, it's the most fun way to watch and consume football to begin with, especially when you're a winner. It's the best way to become a fan into an analyzer. And that's what we're going to help you do throughout this year. So when we're going over the previews on Thursdays and Fridays, Thursdays, the Thursday night preview, along with the early afternoon games on Sunday, Friday, the late afternoon games, and the Sunday night and Monday night games, we're also going to be talking about what bets we like for those games. Or maybe some games we'll decide, you know what, it's better off if you don't bet at all. A lot of that stuff's going to be coming up for the MD's Fantasy Football Show throughout the season. So some exciting new additions we're making. Today's show, we're going to be going over some of my week 1 locks ahead of time, team futures, and some player props like MVP award races and players that I have projected in a certain way that I feel like you'll be able to capitalize depending on what sports book that you are going to want to use and win some money that way too. Well, before we get into any of that, we got to kick off the show, of course, with some more news of the week, because we didn't get to all of it yesterday's show when we went over our top 108 ranked players. Go back on your favorite streaming apps, because we're widely available to you on iHeart, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, pretty much any pod streaming app out there. Go back, subscribe, download, and listen to that, because we went through a lot of core players, a lot of risers and fallers after last week before we head into a big draft weekend, which is Labor Day weekend. So make sure you go ahead and check it out, and check out our rankings on BellyUpFantasySports.com. But let's get into some news that we didn't get to talk about yesterday's show.
Breaking news.
First up, we talked about this a little bit, but we didn't get into too much detail yesterday. T.Y. Hilton, he gets placed on IR. He's going to miss at least the first 3 weeks, but there's a lot of concern that it could be more than that. There's a lot of concern that it could be 6 weeks, maybe even more so, because when this injury first happened, the coaches of the Colts tried to spin this in a positive light as if, well, it might not be season-ending injury, as if that was, a good thing about this injury. We didn't know much about it. He went down in practice a couple weeks ago, came out, seemed like he was back on the field, seemed like he was running around okay. We find out it's a shoulder neck issue. And then the following news that we heard a few days later was, well, we don't think he's going to be out for the year, as if that's the good news. So we don't know exactly how long he's going to be out for. We talked about yesterday Michael Pittman moving up my board in my rankings to wide receiver 38 in half-point PPR leagues. A lot of people liked him as the potential number one receiver for the Colts to begin with. I liked T.Y. Hilton myself because I think a deep threat with Carson Wentz was going to be the best way. But now you take that off the table. Yeah, Michael Pittman will be the most targeted wide receiver. He has a good red zone capability. He is a second-year wide receiver who runs good routes. Therefore, he is poised potentially for a breakout, or at least in good position to do so. Carson Wentz is a better quarterback than Phillip Rivers was last year at that point in his career, I truly believe, going back with Frank Reich. So Michael Pittman to me is somebody who is a high-end wide receiver 4, low-end wide receiver 3 with this news because of the volume and the fact that he should be the number one red zone threat for an offense that should be at least in the middle of the pack, if not in the top 15-ish as far as scoring offenses go. So we do like Michael Pittman there with this T.Y. Hilton injury. Other news, Irv Smith, he's out for the year. Unfortunate. It was going to be a question with the meniscus tear. Are you going to get it just, fixed up, or are you going to fully repair it? Elected to fully repair it. Obviously told the Minnesota Vikings about it ahead of time because they went out and traded for Chris Herndon before the news became official about Irv Smith missing the entire season. Does that mean Chris Herndon's fantasy relevant? Does that mean Tyler Conklin's fantasy relevant? Well, no. Irv Smith was number 3 tight end bust on my list when we went through our best 5 sleeper 5 tight ends. Go out and check that out too, by the way, before you head into your drafts. But he was number 3 because the Vikings don't actually use the tight end position. If you combine Irv Smith and Kyle Rudolph last year, you're still talking about a tight end 2 at best. It's just not a team that's utilized the tight end position. It's not a team that has had great tight ends. Chris Herndon's been nothing but disappointing his entire career. And yes, I know most of that was with Sam Darnold and Adam Gase. But here's the other thing. I don't think he's a good fit. The Minnesota Vikings are a run-first team. The tight ends need to be able to block. Tyler Conklin's going to be on the field more than Chris Herndon's going to be. And given that they don't really particularly utilize the tight ends very consistently in the passing game, I don't think there's much fantasy value there to be had. In more tight end news, we have Evan Ingram. He's dealing with a calf injury. It seems as though at this point, the jury's still out as to whether or not he's going to wind up on the IR and miss at least the first 3 weeks. They're trying to decipher that now. Is he, do they think he's going to be back week 1, week 2? If it's going to be anything more than that, there's a good chance he's going to wind up on the IR and be forced to miss at least the first 3 weeks. If that happens, Caden Smith is presumably the number 1 starting tight end because while Kyle Rudolph is on the roster as well, he's been dealing with a foot injury throughout training camp. Again, not a lot of tight end value there either. The one thing about these things happening in the beginning of the year is that, you're not dealing with as many injuries across the board. There should be tight ends that we have in our top 12. Go to BellyUpFantasySports.com to check out my rankings of who I have in my top 12. You should be able to get your hands on that are better than a Giants tight end. I had Evan Ingram as my tight end 16 even before the injury anyway, because I don't like the way he fits in a Jason Garrett offense with all those mouths to feed, with Kenny Golladay being back, Saquon Barkley being back, Darius Slayton, Sterling Shepard, who's been Daniel Jones' typical number 1 wide receiver. There's a lot of mouths to feed. So again, I don't think there's a lot of tight end value there behind Evan Ingram. I think he was going to be struggling to be a top 12 tight end in his own right. More Colts news. Carson Wentz, he comes off the COVID-19 list. Both the Colts and the Vikings, they're in a tough situation. The coaches aren't happy about it, but there seems to be very little they're going to be able to do about it. And what I'm referring to, of course, is the level of unvaccinated players. Now, as fantasy analysts and really anybody outside the NFL, we're not going to know. We're not going to know who's vaccinated and who's not vaccinated until somebody either tests positive or they come into close contact, because we'll know by which protocols these players have to follow. As it stands right now, a lot of Minnesota Viking players and a lot of Indianapolis Colts players seem to be unvaccinated. This is going to potentially be an issue. Because in some ways, the NFL protocols for COVID are more strict than they were a season ago, believe it or not. Because now it's not just, test negative twice and you might be able to play that week still because they might come back as a false positive. No, it's if you come to close contact, I don't care how many times you test negative. You're missing 5 days if you're not vaccinated, period. So what happens when that's on a Thursday or a Friday or a Saturday or actually really any day after Wednesday and on? You're missing that game. It doesn't matter whether you're positive or not. If you don't have the vaccine, does that affect the way you value guys in your drafts? I would say probably not. If you know a player is definitely not vaccinated and you're stuck between two players and you know one is vaccinated and one's not vaccinated based on the information of the protocols we've had in place thus far, and you want to use that as a tiebreaker, okay, if it's that close. Otherwise, no, because again, we don't know every player that is or isn't, but it is going to be an issue. So keep that in mind not just when you're going through the fantasy drafts, but more so when we're going through the season. You're going to have to be vigilant on the waiver wire. You're going to have, just like last year, a plan A, a plan B, and probably a plan C, just in case something pops up. NFL's made it clear they're not rescheduling games this year. It ain't going to happen. Can't with the new schedule. Hopefully, we don't run into a situation where teams wind up forfeiting, but that's why some of these teams who have a lot more unvaccinated players than others, the coaches are very, very frustrated heading into the season. Kirk Cousins, Carson Wentz especially, has been kind of the lead in that, being that they've already had to go through the COVID protocols and still are refusing to get vaccinated as of this moment. So something we'll have to keep in mind on. As of right now, it doesn't change my ranking in any capacity. Hopefully these guys, if they're not going to get vaccinated, will at least put themselves in situations to stay away from close contact situations, but we'll see how that plays out. Again, I think that's a big reason why Cam was cut. I don't think it was the play of Mac Jones. I like Mac Jones, but I don't think it was the play of Mac Jones that won him the job. I think it's the fact that Cam, even after getting COVID last year, still deciding not to get vaccinated, putting himself in that position in close contact where Bill Belichick just didn't want to have to deal with it. Doesn't feel like he could trust them. We know Belichick doesn't put up with players he can't trust, especially if they're not franchise-setting players, which Cam is not at this point in his career. I think I have more to do that with anything. It's a factor. It's a factor this season. Kenny Golladay, he was able to return to practice on 11-on-11 drills. That's really the most practice he's had almost all training camp. He's got a lot on his plate. If you've listened to this show throughout the summer, you know Chris and I, we debate as far as what Kenny Galladay's upside is. I tend to say he's no more than a wide receiver 3 and a guy that I don't particularly think has a ton of upside. He seems to think that he'll be more of a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2 this season. But this is why. He's dealing with a hamstring injury already. Hamstrings have plagued Kenny Golladay in the past, especially, last season with soft tissue. I don't trust Daniel Jones. I don't trust Jason Garrett. So there's a lot of red flags that hinder any kind of actual ceiling for me for a Kenny Golladay. He's missed almost all of training camp. So he's now tasked with the situation. He's got to get back in football shape before week 1 even rolls around. It's a new offense, a new quarterback that reportedly he hasn't been on the same page with. I'm not big on Kenny Golladay. MDNation, say it with me. Let someone else make that mistake. He doesn't have a ton of upside. If he falls to you in the 9th round because, people in your league are actually smart, yeah, you could take him there. Fine. He's still going to be the number 1 receiver on that team. Still going to be the number 1 touchdown producer when he's out there on a per-game basis. But don't take him thinking that you have a bona fide wide receiver 2 in your squad, because you're going to be setting yourself up for failure. And you know what? Not a lot of upside, which doesn't win championships. Last piece of news I'm going to talk about today, Tariq Cohen, he goes on the PUP list. He's going to be out for the first 6 weeks. We touched on this a little bit in yesterday's show because we're talking about David Montgomery moved up a couple of spots in my rankings as a result to this. But David Montgomery has something else he has to compete with. He has Damian Williams, unfortunately. This still isn't last season where Tariq Cohen goes down and there's nobody of note behind Montgomery, therefore he gets everything. This isn't that situation. Damian Williams has reportedly looked good in camp. Matt Nagy has always had an affinity for Damian Williams going back to Kansas City. And his best attribute is catching the football, not dissimilar to a Tariq Cohen. So I do have to be left to wonder, does this really open up the door for David Montgomery to solidify leading the way in targets, or are we just going to see Damian Williams take over the Tariq Cohen role? Right now, I have them projected pretty evenly when it comes to target share. Of course, David Montgomery leading the way when it comes to carries, which is what solidifies his RB2 floor. But things that we have to talk about, things that we have to worry about as far as what is his upside. Everybody's, very excited, rightfully so, after what he did at the end of last season, being the RB4, taking advantage of the matchups he was in, taking advantage of the volume that he had. But until Matt Nagy gives up the play calling, until Justin Fields is a starting quarterback, I do question the ceiling. And that's kind of why I have him ranked around the 19 range when it comes to half-point PPR as more of a lower end RB2. Because I don't want to get caught drafting him at his ceiling. I don't want to get caught drafting any player at his ceiling because you're setting yourself up for failure again in that situation. Let me draft him at his mean. Let me draft him at his floor. And if I'm able to do that, now I have value coming my way. We'll see exactly what's able to happen there, how that's going to shake out. It will be interesting. Now, I do think it's inevitable that Justin Fields takes over the job sooner rather than later. Again, I would be surprised if come October 1st, Andy Dalton's still the starting quarterback. But that doesn't necessarily mean Matt Nagy gives up the play calling. And that, I think, is just as important, frankly. It needs to go back to Bill Lazor. When that happens, we'll see. Maybe it'll happen sooner rather than later because there's a decent chance that Chicago, first 6 weeks of the season's below 500, and maybe he gives it up then. We'll have to see and find out. But when Justin Fields goes out there, then I will be more confident about David Montgomery being maybe a higher endish RB2 at that point. Still a bad offensive line. The big thing, of course, week one we'll be watching is Damian Williams, but you're not going to know that before your drafts. So that's why make sure you're not drafting David Montgomery strictly at his ceiling. But that's going to do it for the news we have today. We got a lot we got to get through. So I want to jump in. We're going to get a word in from our sponsor real quick. Come back on the other side. I want to talk about my week one favorite bets a little bit ahead of time now before we preview them game by game next week. And let's try to win you guys some money in the week one process. So stay tuned right here on the MD's Fantasy Football Show, and we'll be back right after this. Fellas, take a minute to imagine what a great day is to you. Is it not a beautiful day with your buddies on the golf course for a full 18? 4! Is it not a day on the couch watching the games all day long? I know it's a great day for you when you can win tons of money. Well, then why not make it the perfect day when you sign up for Pigskin Golf today, a newly innovative way to play pick'em style for the NFL season. There are multiple ways to win cash prizes from traditional pick'em pools, full season survivor, last standing survivor, and weekly prizes like perfect weeks and six-pack picks. You can sign up for free and play for the potential of winning prizes too, or even create your own groups for that office pool party. It's created to fit any budget, from the casual player to a high-stakes winner. It's 18 holes for 18 weeks, so make it the perfect day when you sign up with Pigskin Golf today at pigskingolf.com/MDSFantasy. You must sign up before September 9th for the season-long pick'em.
You're listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show.
Welcome back, MDNation, to the show. You are listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show here on social media at Billy Up MDFF Show, or on YouTube, the MD's Fantasy Football Show channel. Please subscribe. You can always catch us on the Unhinged Sports Radio Network. Later on tonight, we'll just stick with that because it's 5 times a week, but later on tonight from 6 to 7:30, we'll be airing live, so check us out then on unhingedsn.airtime.pro. And we're talking about our favorite NFL bets of the 2021 season, starting off with week one. I know this is typically a fantasy football show. We'll go through some fantasy analysis as we go along. Don't you worry. But at this point, we've gotten you as prepared as we can. If you have more questions, make sure you're hitting us up on social media at BillyUpMDFF Show. I'll be there to answer every single one of them. Of course, always get you on the mailbag segment, which we do have at the end of today's show as well. But I want to try to win you guys some money too this year. We're putting more of an emphasis on that this year. So we want to make sure we keep that going and starting it off strong with this show, the NFL Bet Show. So I have some of my favorite week 1 bets that I want to talk about. Starting off with Thursday Night Football next week. I mean, it's week 1. That's the game everybody's going to want to bet on because everyone's going to be tuning in. It kicks off the NFL season. Dallas Cowboys, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, my bet that right now, I think Tampa Bay is -8 favorites. There's going to be a lot of points scored in that game. And I don't have a strong feeling one way or another whether or not Tampa Bay covers or Dallas is able to cover. I do have a strong feeling, however, on the total over. Right now, most lines, and sports books, they change from a little bit, but on average right now, the total is 50.5. I think that's kind of low for two offenses that have the amount of firepower that they do between the Buccaneers and the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas offense, while I think will be improved, is still suspect. Tampa Bay's defense, which is very good, but hasn't changed. They haven't changed much. They have all their starters coming back. So we can kind of predict what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense is. It's going to be hard to run on. Thankfully for the Cowboys, they have a healthy offensive line and a pretty good one at that when they are healthy. Ezekiel Elliott is more in shape, but it's still going to be a hard defense to run on. However, if you spread them out, which the Cowboys can do, this is a team that can be thrown on. And the fact that the Cowboys have CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, they're going to be able to put up some points. Even if Tampa Bay gets up big, by the time we get to fourth quarter, we'll have garbage time points in this game. The offenses are too good not to. I'm a big proponent on this game as a 30-27 type of making game. Maybe 30-24. Either way, I have the over set at 50.5. I'm big on that bet. And of course, we'll preview that game at length from a fantasy situation, next Thursday at 11 a.m. at Belly Up MDFF show on social media and on the YouTube channel, the MD's Fantasy Football Show. And we'll talk about what our fantasy expectations are. But I love it for all the Bucs wide receivers. Love it for Tom Brady. Of course, you don't love it for the Tampa Bay running backs, because I don't even want to touch one in the draft if I can actually help it. The Dallas Cowboys, you're going to have to play Ezekiel Elliott. You're going to have to. He's going to be a top 5 guy in most drafts, most likely, even though it's not a great matchup. But he'll get enough volume, so he should be okay. You'll play Dak. You'll play the 3 wide receivers. Carlton Davis, he doesn't match. He's going to probably take away Michael Gallup. Michael Gallup might be the one guy I'm not looking to play, but CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, all training camp, they've been doing nothing but rotating inside, outside, slot to the outside perimeter, the X wide receiver. Those are the matchups you could take advantage of. Bunting on CeeDee Lamb. I like CeeDee Lamb in that. Amari Cooper in the slot. That's where you can attack Tampa Bay the most. So I like those guys. You'll be able to play those guys. I expect an over at 50.5. Next game to talk about is not a lot of people are going to want to watch this game unless you're a fan of these two teams. But there's money to be had here, and there's going to be fantasy football value to be had here as well. And that's going to be Jacksonville and Houston. I love this bet. First of all, I 100% expect Houston to go 0-17 this year. I do. I think they're going to do it. This team is beyond terrible, beyond a lack of talent on both sides of the ball. Jacksonville is not great. However, there's some reason to be excited about some of their pieces. Well, defensively, at least they have a Josh Allen. They have a premier pass rusher. Of course, you're excited to watch Trevor Lawrence. DJ Chark will be back. Marvin Jones will be back. They have Laviska Shenault, who's been doing well. Yes, they lost Travis Etienne, but they have James Robinson. Yes, they have no offensive line, but Houston doesn't have a defensive line, so it shouldn't matter that much. Jacksonville should win this game. They're favored at -2.5. So less than a field goal. I love that line. And in fact, this is a game that I'm probably going to look to parlay up with another favorite bet of mine at some point during the week. I don't know which one that's going to be yet. Next week, we'll talk more about the parlay bets that I like, especially next Saturday. But I'm big on that's going to be a game I'm going to want to hammer at -2.5. Jacksonville over Houston. They should win that game. Houston should go 0-17. I feel very, very good about that. Of course, fantasy-wise, you like everybody fantasy-wise. I mean, the one guy that we do like for Houston is Brandon Cooks. There's no reason against Jacksonville that the volume he should be seeing won't produce solid fantasy points in that game. So we like Brandon Cooks. We don't really like anybody else in Houston anyway. You shouldn't be having anybody else in Houston on your teams anyway. Maybe we'll get some clarity during that game as far as what the running back situation is surely going to look like. But my theory is, and my expectation is, it's a cluster screw of a situation, to quote Chris. And I don't think you're going to get much value out of it anyway. Jacksonville aside, that's the game you play everybody. If you draft Trevor Lawrence, as I've been harping on MDNation to do because I have him as a QB9, I have him as a top 10 guy, but he's a rookie quarterback. You're not exactly sure what he's going to do. There was ever a week to be confident to go ahead, plug and play him and hope for the best and root for the best and see what you can get in a plus matchup situation with him. That's going to be the week, of course, against Houston week 1. Again, he should have his full plethora of weapons back. He won't be facing much of a pass rush. So sky's the limit for Trevor Lawrence. Has a very good shot to finish as a top 10 quarterback in that week 1 performance. I'm big on DJ Chark this year. I think he's going to be a wide receiver too. But if there's any Jacksonville Jaguar wide receiver you like and have on your team and want to play in your flex, that's the week to do it too. James Robinson will probably, even though he's my RB16 for the season at the moment, will probably be inside my top 12 for that particular week, given that it's Houston. So you love everybody involved there from a fantasy standpoint too. I love Jacksonville at -2.5. Talk about Arizona and Tennessee. So there's a lot of question marks in this game, I think, especially on the Tennessee side of the ball. How healthy is Julio Jones going to be right now? Our expectation is that he will be able to play week 1, but we're not 100% sure. Hasn't played much in training camp, hasn't had another guy who's in a new system with a new quarterback. Now, because he's Julio Jones, if he's healthy, we tend to give him more of the benefit of the doubt that he'll be able to play. And if he's healthy and you drafted him, there's no reason not to play him against this shabby Arizona Cardinals secondary. By far the weakest part of their defense. Obviously, you play Derrick Henry. You love A.J. Brown. Definitely love Ryan Tannehill in this game. These two teams, I think, are kind of evenly matched. Questionable defenses, good offensive pieces. And that's what leads me to my bet of this game, which is the over on the total. The total is at 51.5. I think we have a very good chance for a shootout performance between the Arizona Cardinals and Tennessee Titans. Titans have some better pieces on defense. So do the Cardinals. But they haven't had a lot of time to mesh, and both their secondaries are still very, very questionable. With two teams that have the ability to get down the field. Tennessee with A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. The Arizona Cardinals with the Kingsbury offense and DeAndre Hopkins. We'll see what the addition of A.J. Green winds up being. The addition of Rondale Moore. Very good chance that this game winds up being on the over. Very good chance this winds up being a high-scoring affair. I love the 51.5 over here for the Arizona Cardinals and the Tennessee Titans, given the matchup of these two teams. And that's probably one I would parlay up with the Houston-Jacksonville game, just looking at it now, quite frankly. Next up, my week 1 lock that I love. The Los Angeles Chargers and the Washington football team, because I hate the name. Washington's at +1. It's at home. The Chargers are coming cross-country. They're coming from West Coast to East Coast. Washington has a very good defense. The Chargers might too, with the addition of Brandon Staley at the head coach position. And for once, they're going into this year with a healthy Derwin James and a healthy Joey Bosa. They might not have a lot of depth, but as long as their starters are playing, that's a good defense too. The offenses are going to be where the question is. Can Justin Herbert overcome the pass rush of the Washington defense on the road, on the opposite coast? And can Ryan Fitzpatrick play well in his first game at home? I think this is going to be a low-scoring affair. But the fact that Washington is underdogs at home with a Chargers team that's going through a new coaching change, I think aren't as talented as people try to make them out to be on both sides of the ball. I think Justin Herbert, as you all know, is one of my bust quarterbacks. I'm not as high on him as a lot of people are, especially when he's going to be facing this daunted pass rush here. I like Washington at +1. If you're willing to bet on them at +1, I would say you should be willing to bet on them on the money line to win outright. Because +1, you're pretty much picking them to win at that point. So my money would be on the money line for Washington to outright win at home, with the Chargers going from West Coast to East Coast being a big factor there. And still playing at 1 o'clock. Sometimes these teams, they go from West Coast to East Coast and they want to play a 4 o'clock game. If that happens, it's not much different than it would be, if they were home. But in this case, there is a big time difference there. And I'll be curious to see how these two teams come out week 1 against each other. And I'm going to tend to lean towards the home team. I'm going to tend to lean towards a team that I know has a dominant defense like Washington does. Fantasy standpoint, you're playing all your players involved that you normally would. I mean, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert, because you probably drafted him as a top 12 running back or quarterback, even though he's not on my board. MDNation, let someone else make that mistake. But you're playing all those guys. Maybe you don't play a Jared Cook that week. Mike Williams, we still have to see how healthy he's exactly going to be come week 1. He's been dealing with some injuries. How in shape is he ready to go? But against this team, this Washington team, I don't know how much I want to play a second pass catcher of the Chargers anyway, outside the key guys. Washington, that's not a Ryan Fitzpatrick stream week in my eyes. Because again, Derwin James is healthy. Joey Bosa is healthy. Brandon Staley's the head coach. It's not going to be an easy matchup for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Could be a big-time interception game. However, Terry McLaurin, obvious lock. Antonio Gibson, obvious lock. Logan Thomas is one of my bust tight ends. I wouldn't play him against the Chargers, especially with Derwin James healthy. Now, you're probably going to draft him as he's being drafted as a top 10 guy. If you drafted him as such, you're going to have to play him, but that's why I don't have him projected as a top 10 guy this year. He's a journeyman. There's a lot of things to be worried about with journeyman players who emerge this late in their career when they actually hit 30. I don't care that he got paid. They brought in Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel is going to do more damage to Logan Thomas than really anything else. And that's kind of more the issue. As a slot receiver who's actually going to be targeted, that's going to take away from Logan Thomas. Ryan Fitzpatrick, outside of Mike Gesicki, doesn't have a long track record of featuring the tight end, likes to throw the ball down the field. That's why we love Terry McLaurin so much. But when it comes to betting that game, give me the home underdog every day of the week, especially with a team going from West Coast to East Coast. Next game I want to talk about, Minnesota versus Cincinnati. Minnesota, I know they're on the road here, but Minnesota's only favored by 3.5 points over Cincinnati. A Joe Burrow that is, I think, destined to have a slow start coming off the knee injury, getting confidence in it. Jamar Chase, their new big toy weapon, we've talked about in this show. He's been falling in my rankings because he's probably destined again for a slow start. Between Burrow, between his struggles getting separation and his struggles with drops so far throughout training camp and in the preseason. Let's not forget the Bengals don't have a defense. That didn't change from last year to this year. This is still going to be a putrid defense. Minnesota Vikings, you could argue that they may be better offensively than what we got to see for parts of the year last year, because right now, as it stands right now, when you go into week 1, you actually have a healthy Adam Thielen. You have an emerged Justin Jefferson. Dalvin Cook's ready to go. Offensive line's good. I know they lost Irv Smith, but you still have Tyler Conklin who can block as a tight end. So you're good there when you play your 2 tight end sets. Yes, you lost Gary Kubiak as the offensive coordinator, but you turn things over to his son. So nothing really changes there as far as scheme goes. And this Minnesota defense is going to be better than they were a season ago. Anthony Barr's back. Patrick Peterson is the over the hill? Probably, but we've seen Mike Zimmer miraculously, and I think of Terrace Newman when I think of this, be able to get these veteran corners to play well, even when they're older and we're seemingly over the hill in other locations. This is not going to be a, bottom 20 Vikings defense this season, barring another catastrophe in the injury pool. They're going to be better than that. They're going to be better than what we remember. This is more of a balanced all-around team. I trust a Mike Zimmer defense to not be putrid for 2 seasons in a row. So the Bengals have a tall task. I personally think the Vikings should be touchdown favorites in this game. So the fact that right now they're minus 3.5, I'm all over that game. One of my favorite locks of the week. Another lock of the week, 49ers versus Detroit. 49ers are minus 7.5. This game has double-digit point spread written all over it. 10 plus. I mean, this game really should be minus 10 in favor of San Francisco. Detroit's a terrible team. I like the direction they're going. I like the coaching staff they brought in. But that defense isn't going to be able to stop this 49ers rushing attack. And offensively, they just don't have a lot of firepower. With what is a now healthy San Francisco defense, they managed to get through training camp without losing everybody, at least. I think they're going to have a tough time. Remember, this 49er defense is maybe not quite as talented as it was that during that Super Bowl run, but they're healthy and they got Nick Bosa back. It's going to be tough for Detroit to score points in this game. This has double-digit points written all over it. So to have it minus 7.5, I love San Francisco in this game. I might even tease that game up to 9.5 because I think they win at least by 10. Last lock of the week for week 1 that I had to go over with you guys. It's Denver and New York. Now, Denver, like the Chargers, are going from the West Coast to the East Coast. But unlike the Chargers versus Washington, Denver is a superior team to the Giants. There's no question about it. Defensively, they don't get talked about enough. With the amount of pass rushers they have, the secondary they added in, Vic Fangio coaching for his life, and you know he's coaching the fundamentals. You know this team's going to be able to tackle. This is going to be an excellent Denver Bronco defense this year. That just has not been a big enough talking point in the NFL industry in general. Teddy Bridgewater was the perfect quarterback for the Denver Broncos because he could just play point guard. You don't give the game away. You make sure you hit guys in stride. Make sure you get the ball out to all the skill players that you have everywhere else. He's the perfect guy for this team. Play to the talent you have. The Denver Broncos are a superior talent to New York Giants, who are hoping to have Kenny Golladay back. Probably will not have an Evan Ingram. Are hoping to have a fully ready to go Saquon Barkley and still have a future defense. Right now, Denver Broncos are minus 1.5 favorites. Basically saying it's a pick 'em, I guess because of the West Coast to East Coast move. I'm all over Denver in this game. And that's another game that I would look to parlay up because of how much of a lock it is. Because that's just how superior Denver Broncos are, period. Fantasy standpoint, you'll play all of your Denver Bronco players against the Giants. It's a great matchup. On the Giants side, I mean, outside of Saquon Barkley, I don't know how much I'm going to love playing anybody outside with the New York Giants. That includes Kenny Golladay in this matchup. So we'll have to see exactly what that shakes out to be, and I'll have my week 1 rankings up for you guys next week on the BellyUpFantasySports.com website, and we'll be talking about it next Thursday at 11 a.m. on social media at BellyUpMDFF Show, on the YouTube channel, the MD's Fantasy Football Show, and on the Unhinged Radio Network from 6 to 7:30 on both Thursday and Friday next week. So we'll make sure we have you good to go on what our matchups are going to be. What we're going to do now, though, is we'll take a quick break, come back on the other side. I want to talk about some team futures, Super Bowl futures, division winners, some good value that is there to be had if you guys are able to jump on it now before the season kicks off. So let's get word in from our sponsor, and we're going to talk about those bets here on the other side.
One of the best sponsors of the show is named Symbol. That's SIMBULL. Symbol, where Wall Street meets sports gambling in this innovative app. The Symbol brings the fun of being able to play for the long term by purchasing, selling, and trading stocks of your teams. When your teams win, you win a payout. Well, when they lose, you don't lose money. The value of your team's share is all that matters, and it's easy to use. Just download the Symbol app on your Play Store and use the promo code MDSFantasy for a $10 deposit of at least $10 or more. Join the fun of investing in your team for the long haul, where the sportsbook edge is put back into your hands as the player. For the latest and most fun in sports gambling, download Symbol, and again, use the promo code MDSFantasy for your $10 deposit bonus today.
You're listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show.
We're back, MD Nation. We're back on the MD's Fantasy Football Show. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader. Chris Dowhower not with us today. He won't be with us on Fridays during the regular season, just on Thursdays and Saturdays, which will be our DFS and Bets of the Week show from 9:30 to 10:30
on social media at Billy Up MDFF Show and on the YouTube channel, the MD's Fantasy Football Show. Of course, we're going to be airing live on the Unhinged Sports Radio Network later on tonight from 6 to 7:30. You can go to unhingedsn.airtime.pro. Play it on the background. Play it while you cook. Play it while you drive home. It's one of the best 24/7 sports radio networks out there for free consumption. And that's all you got to do is hit the link. We're talking about our best NFL bets for the upcoming NFL season. We just went through our week 1 locks for you guys. Now it's time to talk about our Super Bowl futures. And we've been getting you guys ready for your dynasty leagues and your redraft leagues and talking so much fantasy football. We actually haven't talked about, what teams we like the best for the Super Bowl run this year. We haven't talked about that. We're going to talk about it now because I want to talk about it in a betting standpoint. I want to talk about it from the standpoint it could actually win you some money. Now, of course, the favorites, and they should be, Kansas City Chiefs at plus 450 and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at plus 550. Both solid bets, by the way. Look, is it rare that we see rematches from one year to another? Yeah, it is. But somehow, in some ways, both of these teams got better than they were a season ago. The Kansas City Chiefs markedly got better on the offensive line with the moves they made in the offseason. They might have a top 5, top 3 even offensive line this year, which is scary with Patrick Mahomes back there. And their defense is still suspect, but as we've seen every single year, Steve Spagnuolo is able to get them to play their best defense and is able to game plan very well when they get to the postseason. And the two sides of the ball complement each other very well. And you look around the AFC, there's some good competition. But the Kansas City Chiefs still have to expect it to be the favorite, and always will be as long as there's a Patrick Mahomes back there beating away. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, while they brought back all 22 starters, and they won the Super Bowl last year, of course, you can say in some ways, well, roster-wise, did they get better? Maybe not necessarily roster-wise. But remember last year, it was a lot of new pieces on a new team and a new system with no time to prepare. Brady on an MCL tear throughout the year, fully 100% healthy this season, with a full training camp, all the practice in the world, and Antonio Brown for a full season rather than a half. So in those ways, the Buccaneers did get better. So of all the years to expect a rematch, this is the year that I would be okay with it. This is the year that I would feel confident in expecting it and possibly betting it. So they're not bad bets there. Now, of course, though, because of the favorites, those aren't the most valuable bets you're going to possibly have from a Super Bowl future standpoint. Personally, the most valuable to me is the Browns at plus 1,600. Look, outside of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Browns on paper might be the most complete team from the offense to the defense side of the ball. You paid Myles Garrett. You added the Jadeveon Clowney. We already know this was a good Browns defense. Kevin Stefanski has the offense rolling in the right way. This team has an identity. There's not too much pressure on Baker Mayfield to have to win games anymore because the running game is so elite. And now he just has to play action pass. And when he does play action pass, you have, at least for now anyway, a healthy OBJ, a Jarvis Landry, some other nice weapons between a Higgins and a Peoples-Jones where maybe we can see what kind of third receiver you wind up having. You have an Austin Hooper, a Harrison Bryant, who I like as a young guy. It's going to be his second year this year. There's a lot of pieces in place for this Browns team. On paper, they're probably the most complete team next to Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And while it remains to be seen if they can knock off the Kansas City Chiefs, it remains to be seen if any team in the AFC can knock off the Kansas City Chiefs. At plus 1,600 for a team that good, that talented on both sides of the ball, I'm placing some money there. That is definitely the direction I'm going. The Baltimore Ravens were a team that I was going to talk about too until they lost J.K. Dobbins. And while their running game will still be elite because you have Lamar Jackson and Gus Edwards is a good back, the thing about Dobbins was he took them to the next level because he was a guy that you could give him the ball anywhere on the field and he might take it to the house because of his explosive ability and his fit within that offensive system. They don't have enough guys like that. Now, maybe they're able to open up more of a passing game than they've ever had in their life because they added Sammy Watkins, who's familiar with Greg Roman. They added Rashad Bateman, who, I know he's out for the first 3 weeks, but he'll be back throughout this season. Marquise Brown now gets to fit more of a role that he belongs in, which is more of a complementary deep threat wide receiver rather than the number one target. All those things are true. But I don't think this team is, on paper, I don't know if they're better than the Browns. I don't know. Without J.K. Dobbins, this team is the one that can knock off the Kansas City Chiefs. The value is still okay at plus 1,100, but that's not where I'm going to place my bet now. My value bet is going to be the Browns. Now, there's other teams that are interesting. The Bills are an interesting team at plus 1,200. The Rams are an interesting team at plus 1,300 because if there's an NFC team that I think has the chance to go toe-to-toe with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on both sides of the football, it's the Los Angeles Rams. So them being at plus 1,300, that's another value play that I'm probably going to look to throw some money on. The upgrade of Matthew Stafford at quarterback, the fact that this already is a very good offense, even with Jared Goff, it was a good offense. It just got a hell of a lot better with Matthew Stafford back there. They lost Brandon Staley, their defensive coordinator. We'll have to see how the play calling change affects that, but this defense is all its talent intact, from Aaron Donald to Jalen Ramsey. So it still should be a very good defense. Their problem is they have to play in what, in my estimation, is the best division in all of football, which is the NFC West, where there's a real chance that everyone in the NFC West could make the playoffs this year. Because now that we have the 7 games, we have the extra wild card, every team in the NFC West could make the playoffs. That's a possibility. That's how good they are. And with the situation in front of them now with the extra wild card game, that's what we're looking at. So that's their big issue. Are they able to survive their own division because of how competitive it is? But that's the one team that I have that can go toe-to-toe with Tampa Bay Buccaneers, theoretically speaking. So I like their value there too. But let's talk about the divisional rivals. Let's talk about the divisional odds. This is where I want to get into, some different things. And we look up here, and we'll talk about the AFC East to kick things off. Buffalo Bills at minus 150. Yeah, they're definitely the favorites. They should be the lock. I do like the value of the Miami Dolphins, though. Think about it this way. If Tua Tagovailoa can become the player we hope he can be, or at least I hope he can be. I know there's some haters out there, but I think Tua can be very good. And they have the weapons in Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle and Devontae Parker and Mike Gesicki this year, and they're able to get something figured out consistently in the running back game, whether it's a Myles Gaskin or a Savon Ahmed. It's not going to be a Malcolm Brown. He might just be annoyingly involved. But if Tua takes the next step up, that defense of the Miami Dolphins is probably the best defense in the AFC, and that includes the New England Patriots. So if Tua takes that next step up, that's a more complete team than the Buffalo Bills are, and they can definitely go toe-to-toe with them. So at plus 300, I like the Miami Dolphins as a value play. The Bills are a favorite. If you want to bet the Bills, there's nothing wrong with that. You're not going to make the big profit off of that, but that is the more sure bet. But at plus 300, I like going with the Miami Dolphins in that situation. It's not going to be New England Patriots. It's not going to be. I like some of the moves they made. They still don't have a ton of firepower on offense. You got the rookie quarterback in Mac Jones. I think he's good. I think he's NFL ready. I think he's ready to beat the Dolphins and the Bills, though, this season for that division. Stephon Gilmore's out for the first 6 weeks, so I know you get him for most of the year, but without their top corner, that Patriots defense is going to be very good, is going to be a little vulnerable in the secondary without him. That's going to be a thing. Let's move on. Let's talk about the AFC North. We'll run through the AFC here for the divisions. So again, this is where our value for the Super Bowls comes into play, and we have more value again for the division. I had value for the Cleveland Browns to win the Super Bowl, go to the Super Bowl future because they're at plus 1,600. Well, they have value here for the division because the Baltimore Ravens are still the favorites at plus 115, surprisingly enough, even after the Dobbins injury. Cleveland Browns are at plus 160. That's value. But there's more value here in the AFC North. I don't know what happened between the end of last season and this offseason. But the Pittsburgh Steelers are a team getting incredibly slept on, and it makes no sense to me. Ben Roethlisberger had by far his worst year last year. And this team still only lost 2 games. This team still won the AFC North, having his worst year last year. If he's any better, if Najee Harris can bring them any semblance of a running game and make that offense just a little more efficient, nothing changed on the defensive side of the ball. In fact, it may have even gotten a little bit better because I love the Melvin Ingram signing and what that does to help out their pass rush on the opposite side of TJ Watt. They're at plus 320 to win that AFC North division. That's value. That is a good bet. I probably wouldn't bet on the Ravens winning that division, to be honest with you. I know they're still in the plus side, which is nice to have, but to me, bet on the Browns, bet on the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's the way to go. And I don't know why people are sleeping on the Steelers the way that they are, but that's some good value right there. Let's move into the AFC West. Now, on the AFC West side of things, there's not much value to be had, right? Because, barring a catastrophe like a Patrick Mahomes injury, knock on wood, because no one wants to see that happen, they're at minus 280. If you just want to bet on something just to surely win, don't need necessarily a big profit margin, just want to have a lock bet, you can go ahead and bet Kansas City. I'm not going to waste my time or my money on anybody else. Now, the Denver Broncos at plus 550 is the only thing that's kind of interesting, but that would have been interesting if they had a better quarterback at the helm, given the rest of the team that they have. Everything else, I don't see any possibility of the Chargers, the Broncos, the Raiders usurping the Kansas City Chiefs this season. I just don't see it. So let's go to the AFC South. I'm surprised the Titans are as favored as they are in the AFC South. Now, I like the Titans. I like the moves they've made. I know the Colts now kind of have to deal a little bit with the T.Y. Hilton situation. But to be minus 150 for a team that still has a lot to prove defensively is interesting to me. For a team that has to prove that they can still be the same efficient offense without Arthur Smith calling the plays. Todd Downey is not a renowned play caller here. That's interesting. The Colts have everything in place, and they got better at the quarterback position. My money is on the Colts here. They're at plus 140. And there's no reason in my mind that they're not as good, if not better, on paper on both sides of the football than the Tennessee Titans. So at plus 140, the AFC South, there is value to be had there with the Indianapolis Colts. Of course, Jacksonville, Houston, they're not going to be a thing. It's a two-way race. So bet on the team that has the higher upside. What do we got up next? We got to jump to the NFC. Let's jump to the NFC East. Probably the worst division in the NFL, or at least close to it. Dallas Cowboys favored at plus 110. Washington right behind them at plus 160. You have the Eagles and Giants both at plus 450. We're not going to waste our time there. So this pretty much comes down to, do you believe in the Cowboys offense with Dak Prescott back? Do you believe in what they could be now with that potential, with all those skill players? Do you believe that Micah Parsons and that linebacker core and the addition of Dan Quinn, defensive coordinator, put that in air quotes because I've never seen him do anything good outside of Seattle. Do you believe that team can be better than the vaunted defense of the Washington football team and the addition of Ryan Fitzpatrick, the emergence possibly of an Antonio Gibson, the addition of a Curtis Samuel? Both teams got better, plain and simple. But I think Washington's defense is a little overrated. Not the front four. Front four is excellent. There's no question about that. But that secondary is vulnerable. And if you can max protect and go deep on this team, you can beat this defense. If you can run at their ends, you can beat this defense. There's two things the Cowboys can do to nullify that pass rush of Washington. As long as Dak stays healthy, my money is on the Cowboys. And the fact that they're plus money, plus 110, even though they're the favorites, that's the value I want to bet on in the NFC. Ryan Fitzpatrick still has too many Fitz tragic games rather than Fitz magic games, where he's going to give some games away. He's going to have those 3 and 4 interception weeks where they flat out lose as a result of it. It's not a given he's the starting quarterback for 17 games. He has too many of those weeks in a row. You can see Taylor Heineke back there. I know people like Taylor Heineke. Everybody loves a backup who, shines in a given moment. He's not a good NFL pro over a long, consistent haul. That's ultimately going to be Washington's undoing in my book when it comes to the division winner, and that's why my money is on Dallas when it comes to this matchup. Let's talk about the NFC North. Green Bay Packers heavily favored, should be, minus 150, and I'm actually good with that bet too as a lock bet just to try to win some money. I'm good with that bet. The Vikings are the only other team where it makes it interesting because, again, like I said, I trust a Mike Zimmer team to not be as bad on defense as they were a season ago. So I think you have a decent chance there for that to happen. However, do they really have the firepower to beat out an Aaron Rodgers, a Packers defense that arguably got better and arguably better defensive play caller, which could go a long way? An Aaron Rodgers who seems very, very motivated this season, calling it the last dance with him and Devontae Adams, looking to prove the Green Bay Packers wrong, looking to light the league on fire and possibly go somewhere else next season. It's hard to bet against the Green Bay Packers in this instance. So I don't think there's a ton of value for the Minnesota Vikings. The only other team I would consider, Chicago Bears. I think, they're going to miss the playoffs again. I think you're going to see them go through a coaching change. The Detroit Lions still have a long way to go. So even though you're getting, not in the plus territory with the Green Bay Packers at minus 150, that's a good bet that I feel good about being able to cash out on at the end of the season. Then we get in the NFC South. Kind of the equivalent of the AFC West, where hands down is the Kansas City Chiefs and nobody else. I look at this very similarly. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, minus 220. It's hands down the Bucs and then everybody else. I agree the Saints are the second best team in that division. I like the fact that they were able to make the correct decision in starting Jameis Winston over Taysom Hill. We talked about that in yesterday's show. What that does for all the fantasy skill players involved as a result. It boosts everybody. It's great. It's fantastic. It's awesome. It doesn't make him a great team. Defense is good, but there were some distractions on the defensive side of the ball. There were some distractions off the field with the Marshawn Lattimore last season that I am a little bit concerned about. I don't know that defense is going to be as good as it was a year ago, and they're going to need it to be. I love Marquez Callaway as a sleeper wide receiver, but without Michael Thomas, how much consistent firepower do you actually have? Jameis Winston, I hope he's turned a corner. I hope he's found a way to not be a turnover machine that he has been in years past, but that's still going to have to remain to be seen. I don't see any way the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lose this division. They are head and shoulders better than everybody else there. So again, kind of like the Kansas City Chiefs, where if you just want to make a sure bet and you're not really too worried about your profit margins off of your bet, then fine, go ahead and lay some money there. But there's not that value there to be had in the NFC South. Now, in the NFC West is a different story because the NFC West, you can make the argument that there's value to be had with every single team because you can make the argument that every single team is a contender to win that division. Again, that's how good all four of these teams are. That's how close this race is probably going to be throughout the season. Both the Rams and the 49ers are at plus 180 to win this division. Seattle Seahawks at plus 275 and the Cardinals at plus 400. Now, here's the deal. The best value to me is the San Francisco 49ers. And that's not because I'm a homer. Look at the schedule. Look at the talent of the team. The 49ers and the Cardinals have much more favorable schedules than the Seahawks and the Rams do because they finished, last and second to last in the division a year ago. But we know the 49ers are a Super Bowl caliber team when people are healthy. As of right now, people are healthy. They're starting off the season with the Detroit Lions, Philadelphia Eagles. They've run some tougher matchups with the Green Bay Packers and Seattle Seahawks, and they have to play Arizona, and that's going to be interesting. But they finish off the year with teams like Cincinnati, Jacksonville, Houston, Minnesota, which is a winnable game. Things are lined up for San Francisco to win this division. So at plus 180, that's the best value. I think the Rams are the best team, who are also at plus 180. So I would definitely throw some money on the Rams too. But the best value for me is San Francisco 49ers because of that schedule. The Rams have to play a much tougher schedule, which gets in the way. But I do think the Rams are the best team in that division as it stands right now. Seattle at plus 275 is value because that's just fantastic odds. And they have the offensive firepower. I love Shane Waldron taking over for the offensive coordinator position, especially over Brian Schottenheimer, who hasn't had a creative bone in his body in forever. If you thought Russell Wilson got to cook last year in the beginning half of the season, I think you're going to get to see it now for all 17 games, which could be the biggest difference in the world and could wind up being the reason why Seattle has just as good of an opportunity to win this division as anybody else, even with arguably a weaker defense. But we saw a night and day difference in their play when Jamal Adams was actually out there and healthy. So assuming he can stay healthy this season, they might not be as putrid as they were a year ago. It's still not going to be good. But kind of like the Kansas City Chiefs, if they can be complementary of their offense with the defensive style play, which I think they can do with a healthy Adams back there, then things can work out just okay. Seattle's in that position, so I do like some money there. Basically, I would put a little bit of money on every single team in this division because even the Arizona Cardinals, while I do think they are the least talented team of this division, you can make the argument that you have Kyler Murray, who's up and coming. They have good players on offense. They added Rondale Moore. Chase Edmonds, I think, is in a better position with no Kenyon Drake there. They're not going to be wasting their time on an inefficient running back. I think that helps. You can make the argument that the addition of a J.J. Watt, the addition of a Zaven Collins makes that defense a little bit better with an aggressive Vance Joseph calling plays. So they might be, they might be able to put some real pressure on a lot of these teams. They have enough pieces in place that if things fell their way, if players developed the way they would hope they would, the argument for them to be a division winner is there too. So at plus 400, I'm not going to throw a ton of money on them because, again, this is a tough division. I think they are the least talented team of this division, but still worth a little bit of a bet because that's just how close that whole thing is. All right, so what we're going to do is take a quick break, come back on the other side. We still got the player props that I want to get through, and then we have the mailbag segment for you at the end of the show, as we always do. So stay tuned here on the MD's Fantasy Football on social media at Belly Up MDFF Show or on YouTube. Subscribe when we're done, and we'll be back right after this.
Your client's going away for 10 years. Unless we swap first-round picks.
Fantasy football draft season is upon us. It's time for you to put the PP back in the PPR league with the sponsors of today's show, Manscaped. The leaders in below-the-waist grooming just launched the new Performance Package 4.0. Don't neglect your balls like the Packers front office has been neglecting Aaron Rodgers. Join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get ready for kickoff by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY. This will help you tame that Troy Polamalu in your pants. And good news for our international listeners. Their life-changing products are now available in Canada, the UK, across Europe, Australia, South Africa, and Singapore. All with the 20% off and free international shipping when you use the promo code BELLYUPFANTASY today.
You're listening to the MD's Fantasy Football Show.
And we're back. We're back, MD Nation, on the MD's Fantasy Football Show. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader, streaming live on social media at Belly Up MDFF Show and on YouTube. Subscribe to the MD's Fantasy Football Show channel when you get a chance. Of course, we'll be airing live later on tonight from 6 to 7:30 on the Unhinged Sports Radio Network at unhingedsn.airtime.pro, which you should be checking out all the time because we have great 24/7 sports content coming through all throughout the day, covering all sports of all sizes and all shapes and everything. We got everything. So check it out. Great content for you guys. We've been talking about our best bets for the NFL upcoming season because we're trying to win you guys some money. It's going to be a new thing that we're going to be emphasizing on the show throughout the year to begin with. Now, for this segment, we're going to be talking about the player props. And we're going to kick this thing off with, the most exciting conversation of player prop talk at all, which is the MVP race. Of course, the MVP race is led by Patrick Mahomes, but Patrick Mahomes is plus 350. Yeah, I'll put some money on that. I don't care if he's a favorite. Plus 350 to win the MVP with the offensive line that they've been able to put in place in front of him. Amazingly enough, a kid who's still in his mid-20s who potentially could be getting even better. It's the reason why he's my number one quarterback in fantasy football, folks. So I love Patrick Mahomes at plus 350. Aaron Rodgers is a good one, too. I know he was the MVP last year. It's hard to win the MVP back-to-back years. But given everything that's happened, sometimes the MVP can be more about storyline than necessarily definitely being the most valuable or definitely having the most production. If the storyline goes like this, Aaron Rodgers away from the team all off season, at the last second, they strike a deal to bring him back in to make him happy. He comes back in and lights it up like he did last year. 48 touchdowns plus, over 4,400 yards. He's able to come back and do that again or do it better. There's a good chance that he wins the MVP. Now, statistically speaking, and we've talked about this all off season for your fantasy football purposes, regression should be in place. He's never thrown 48 touchdowns in his career before. The year that he threw 40, which was his career high previously, he came back the following year and threw 32. Regression should be coming, but at plus 900, given the storyline, that's okay value. That's okay value. But the guy who I'm probably going to bet on, who has, to me, the most value out of anybody on this list, is Tom Brady. Let's remember, he threw 40 touchdowns last season. He led this team to a Super Bowl. If Tom Brady at 44 years old throws 40 touchdowns and close to 5,000 yards, and Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the number one record in the NFL, which is entirely possible, I think there's a very good chance that the NFL will give Brady an MVP trophy. Just because it would just be incredible. You want to talk about storylines? The guy's 44 years old. It would be absolutely amazing if he could put together a season like he did last year. And he's my number 6 fantasy quarterback because I believe that he can, because he's in the right situation to do so. Maybe he won't be the most valuable player, technically speaking. I still think that's Aaron Rodgers. If you actually look at value, what these quarterbacks, and it's always going to be a quarterback, unfortunately, but what these quarterbacks mean to their teams. I don't think anybody's more valuable than Aaron Rodgers. That includes Patrick Mahomes. We've seen the Chiefs. We had 2 years ago, Mahomes went down to injury. The Chiefs still managed to find a way to win games. Without Aaron Rodgers, this Packer team goes from a division winner to probably picking in the top 5 next year in the NFL draft. So from a value standpoint, I do think it's Aaron Rodgers. But Brady, the story, at 44, he's able to put up those kind of numbers. Buccaneers are the best record in the NFL. His odds right now, I'm going to throw it up on the screen for you guys. Plus 1,200 to win the MVP. Plus 1,200. That's a bet I'm definitely going to make. I do like, there's 2 other guys I like, their value-wise. Josh Allen plus 800. The league is falling over themselves for Josh Allen. If he's able to do what he did last season, he'll very much be in the conversation. If he can outproduce what he did last year, he'll definitely be right there with Mahomes and the rest of those guys that we talked about. So Allen at plus 800 is a good value too. And you can make an argument he's got a good value too, because if the Buffalo Bills defense disappoints like it did a season ago, a lot of that was on Josh Allen's shoulders to carry them to the division win last year. It could wind up being the same situation again this year, especially the way that offense runs. They don't utilize the running game. Even if they had a great running game, I don't know if they would utilize it. It's not what Brian DeBall does, and that's not what they have set up to do again this year. This is going to be a top 3 volume passing offense, plain and simple. So he's going to have plenty of opportunity to shine. And he looked great in the last preseason game. He continues on that, continues on what he did a season ago. Allen's going to be there at plus 800. But the other value I like a lot is Russell Wilson. Now, here's what Wilson has going for him that Mahomes doesn't have, and Rodgers doesn't have, and Brady doesn't have. He hasn't won one yet. He hasn't won an MVP. He's been one of the top quarterbacks for a long, long time, and he hasn't been able to get that MVP trophy. I talked about the addition of what I think Shane Waldron could bring to the table. DK Metcalf is continuing to develop and continuing to get scarier. Tyler Lockett is as dependable of a target for Russell Wilson as they come. They have a good offense in place. If Waldron can take this offense to being more consistent and letting Russell Wilson cook, because remember, in the beginning of the year, Russell Wilson looked like the favorite to win the Super Bowl, not Super Bowl, but the MVP award. Because he hasn't won one yet, because he's an NFL good boy and has that on his PR record, if he actually puts it together from week 1 to week 18, there's a very good chance Russell Wilson can win the MVP. And he has the best odds of all these guys that we've talked about thus far at plus 1,600. So that is a value bet I can certainly get behind on as well. Let's talk about some other player props that we have throughout the season. Now, these are guys that are be more along the lines of fantasy involved because they have certain over-under season statistical projections that I have, a little bit different than what the over-unders are set at. Starting off with Ezekiel Elliott. I've talked about in length throughout this show, throughout this year, especially when we got to see Ezekiel Elliott come out in training camp, watch the type of shape he's in, watched about the things that he's talked about. He's ready to go. He has something to prove after having his worst statistical year last year. He has something to prove having Tony Pollard breathing down his neck. His over-under is set at 1,099 and a half yards. That's his over-under. Dak's back. Even though he was out of shape last year, even though the offensive line was banged up a season ago, and his efficiency numbers were down across the board, he was still on pace for over 1,200 yards last year had Dak stayed healthy. Last time I checked, he's healthy this year. That offensive line is healthy this year. Ezekiel Elliott is probably in better shape than when he was a rookie. He weighs the same he did his freshman year of college. So you have a powerful and explosive Ezekiel Elliott in this offense team. Look out. I love the over bet. It's set at minus 135. Give me Ezekiel Elliott all day, every day on the over for his rushing total over 1,099 and a half yards, without a doubt. And that's why I love him in fantasy so much. That's why he's a top 5 guy. Here's another one, and this goes hand in hand with what I talked about earlier with the Pittsburgh Steelers being slept on. Ben Roethlisberger over under 4,050 and a half yards at minus 115. So almost even money for Ben Roethlisberger to throw just over 4,000 yards. I know there's been a lot of talk about Najee Harris and the team getting back to its old identity of being more run-centric. But do you guys really think that this team is going to be run first? Because that's what it would have to become for Ben Roethlisberger not to hit that number. That's what would have to happen. He has weapons galore everywhere around him. And I know last season he fell short of that number. But again, last year was by far his worst statistical season. 2 seasons ago, he came off of a 5,000-yard year. I go back to the running game. I know they want to emphasize the running game, but you still have Deontay Johnson. You still have Chase Claypool. You still have Juju Smith-Schuster. This offense is still going to be built around Ben before it's built around the rookie Najee Harris. Now maybe it makes the passing game more efficient because now you can do play action. His arm can't be much worse than it was a season ago. Remember, 6.1 yards per attempt. By far a season low. His career average is 7.4. So even if you can get to somewhere in the middle,
He should be looking at over 4,000 yards, and I haven't projected over as such. That's why I love Ben Roethlisberger bet. Another guy, another quarterback set at 4,050 and a half yards on his over-under passing is Trevor Lawrence. Now, this one I think is a little less of a lock than the Ben Roethlisberger bet, but again, at minus 115 and good value. Because again, it's a terrible Jaguar defense. It's not a good team. It's a rookie head coach in the NFL, a rookie quarterback. I'm counting on there being garbage time. I'm counting on there being volume. And the fact that he actually has good receivers who can break yards after the catch, and Laviska Shenault, who can have big plays in a DJ Chark and a Marvin Jones, makes me feel pretty good about his chances of being able to get well over 4,000 yards this season. So that's why I have him at the over at 4,050 yards and a half and minus 115. Another guy who gets no respect, Tua Tagovailoa. 3,900 and a half yards is his over-under at minus 115. This is another great bet. They bring in Will Fuller. They draft Jalen Waddle. They still have Devontae Parker. Have Mike Gesicki. Myles Gaskin is a good yards after the catch running back. They've been bringing in a system to get him more aggressive. Tua is in every position to get over that 3,900 yards. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Let's see if we get the frog out of my throat on the next one. DK Metcalf. 9 touchdowns over under. I got the over at minus 115. DK Metcalf, 9 touchdowns. Are you kidding me? After everything I just talked about with the Seattle offense, everything I just talked about with Russell Wilson, and what I expect the team to be able to be. Yeah, DK Metcalf plus 9 touchdowns. That's it. He's my wide receiver 4. I definitely have this guy getting double-digit touchdowns, and this is the year, this should be the year, he overtakes Tyler Lockett as the number 1 targeted wide receiver. It's his 3rd season. There's a good chance we see a lot of development in his game, especially in the red zone, not just being a deep field threat. Shane Waldron comes from a system where they utilize Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods all throughout the field, every level of the field. So there's going to be an expansiveness to the range of a DK Metcalf game. Love him at plus 9 touchdowns. The next guy is probably the biggest lock bet of them all, and that's Jonnu Smith. Now, you guys know at MDNation, I love Jonnu Smith for fantasy purposes, for every situation. I think it's a joke. It's an absolute joke that his over-under touchdown number is 4.5. 4.5 touch. Jonnu had 8 touchdowns last year in 14 games on an offense where he was not the number 1 red zone target. What's with the hatred on Jonnu Smith? You give me minus 115 at 4.5. I show you one of the best prop bet locks of the year. He's definitely getting over 5 touchdowns, guys. It's not even a question. We talked about this several times. I expect him to be the number 1 pass catcher of the New England Patriots, and the addition of Mac Jones now being the quarterback only raises that ceiling of a Jonnu Smith. I don't care they have Hunter Henry. They're going to use them both. They're both going to be utilized in the red zone. The receivers, none of the receivers might get 5 touchdowns this year, but I guarantee you both Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith get over 5 touchdowns this year. But Jonnu Smith for sure. Love that bet, 4.5. Are you kidding me? The other guy is DJ Chark, and I will die on this hill. I will die on this hill. I will pound this table and die on this hill for DJ Chark this year. I got him as my wide receiver 22. That's 17 spots ahead of ADP and 15 spots ahead of ECR. He is a wide receiver too. Why there's so much hatred for a guy? Because he was banged up in a horrible team, in a horrible quarterback situation last year, and didn't perform as the wide receiver 15 that he did the year before. Suddenly this year is just a complete afterthought because they signed Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault's getting run. What, are you kidding me? DJ Chark is everything Marvin Jones used to be. Used to be.
He's going to be the number one target of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And his over-under receiving yards is set at 899.5, just shy of 900 yards. I have DJ Chark for over 1,000-yard season. There's going to be volume. He's an explosive wide receiver. And Urban Meyer's already confirmed that he's going to be playing the X wide receiver in that offense. That's all I needed to know, because that means he's going to be the number one read once he's out there. Do I have some concerns about the start of the year that he has? Because he hasn't really been out there for training camp, but he hasn't been able to get out there for Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, I do. I do have some concerns about that, without a doubt. Not enough to make me think he's going to have a mediocre season here. So DJ Chark, 899 yards and a half over under, taking the over at plus, you know, plus odds, plus 105. Love that bet. Love that bet. I go back to Janu again because his receiving yards is set at 525 over under. That's a joke. At minus 115. I got this guy projected for about 800 receiving yards. So I'm way over that mark. Way over that mark. And this isn't a situation where I'm looking at it and saying, is there something I'm missing because the books have this number set there? Now, I think everybody is wrong and missing the boat on this. And I don't need to talk more about Janu Smith to know why, but bet over on Janu Smith on touchdowns, bet him over on his receiving marks for the season. This next one's really interesting. Jalen Hurts. Now, if this wasn't even money, because he's plus 100, so if this wasn't even money, I don't know if I would definitely make this bet or not, but the odds are making good value. Jalen Hurts' rushing yards is set at 650.5. I actually have him projected for rushing over 800 yards this season, so I'm definitely over on this one. Do I see where they're coming from on the 650 yards? Yeah, because you can make the argument, especially now they traded for Gardner Minshew, that there can be a question if Jalen Hurts is truly going to be the 17-game starter. There is a little bit of a question on that. I still believe he will be, because I still believe in order for this offense to get anything done, for it to function any capacity, Hurts is going to have to make things happen with his legs. And I do think that he is better than Gardner Minshew, certainly better than Joe Flacco. And while he might have some games where there might start to be some rumblings, some discussion internally about benching him, because he is going to have some bad interception games because he's just not a very efficient passer. He doesn't complete a lot of balls. That's going to be an issue, but I do think ultimately, barring injury, he does get to play the 17 games. I do think that winds up happening. And if that happens, he's going to run a ton this season, especially over a 17-game stretch. So I do take the over on Jalen Hurts at even money, over 650.5 rushing yards this season. Last player prop we're going to talk about before we get into the mailbag segment. Lamar Jackson. His over-under for rushing, 925 yards and a half. Basically, the book's saying that he's not going to go a third season in a row rushing for 1,000 yards. The over is set at minus 110. Give me that bet every day of the week, all day long. I'm definitely making that bet. Why wouldn't Lamar Jackson go over 1,000 yards again this season? You think because he's going to throw more, that he's not going to get those rushing yards? This offense is dependent on Lamar Jackson using his legs. This offense is dependent on him being able to make plays. J.K. Dobbins being out, I think, only puts a little more emphasis on Lamar rushing the football. And even if he does throw a little bit more, they threw a little bit more in 2018 when he had 36 passing touchdowns, and he still got well over 1,000 yards that season. That doesn't suddenly stop now. So give me Lamar Jackson over 925 yards and a half rushing at minus 110 this year. He's going to be the first quarterback ever to go 3 seasons in a row of plus 1,000 yards rushing. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. And I love that bet. All right, guys, guess what time it is?
The mail's here.
Now, remember, if you ever want to get on the mailbag segment, all you got to do is hit us up on social media at BillyUpMDFF Show. We will answer any one of your questions that you have. We know this is a big draft weekend. It's Labor Day weekend. Preseason's over. Hopefully, at this point, any surprise injuries are done with, at least the ones before week 1 anyway. We will help you out the entire time. And we'll pick out our favorite questions and put them on the show like we're going to talk about right now. But take advantage of that. Use this as a resource. We're here to be a tool for you. First question up, Noah. If I draft Nick Chubb in the first round, is Kareem Hunt a must-take? I can see why you would think that, Noah. Especially after last season, we saw Nick Chubb go down. Kareem Hunt walks in. And you know, Kareem Hunt actually wasn't particularly efficient. And in some ways, his play was a little bit disappointing. He was still a top 6 running back during the stretch without Nick Chubb. It's not a must. It's not a must. If you had Nick Chubb last year and you didn't have Kareem Hunt, that wasn't the reason you lost the championship, if you even did. Because there's a lot of teams who had Nick Chubb who won the championship and didn't have Kareem Hunt on their roster. It's not a must. I will say this, though. It's the one situation where I wouldn't mind having both. Because you could actually play both on a week-to-week basis. Even when Chubb's healthy, Kareem Hunt is still a flex play week in and week out. So because you're getting a guy that could actually start in your lineup alongside Nick Chubb and, of course, has, top 5 potential if the guy in front of him goes down in this situation as a top handcuff, it makes it a little bit more interesting. However, here's my overall advice, and it's perfect to go over with, the draft weekends coming up. My overall advice to everyone is this. Never think to yourself going into a draft, or even, if in this case, in the first round, you wind up with Nick Chubb and then you're thinking the rest of the draft, never go in with the idea that you have to grab a particular player. What happens is that you don't get that player, and then you panic. You lose your spot in your strategy. You lose where you wanted to do, and then you make bad decisions. And when you make one bad decision in a draft, you usually follow up with a second bad decision, and it just spirals out of control. Just take the best value. What's the best value according to your board or someone's board that you trust? Hopefully, the MD's Fantasy Football Show on the BellyUpFantasySports.com website, where I have the rankings up. And go off of that. Always be flexible. Always be water in your drafts. Don't make yourself a statue, because statues can't move. That's the problem. There's no flexibility in a statue. And that's the exact opposite of what you have to be during your draft strategy. So don't go into any draft thinking you have to target one particular guy. Next question, Connie. Do I trade Henderson and Trey Sermon for Clyde Edwards-Helaire? No. Clyde Edwards-Helaire I definitely have ranked ahead of those two, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire is running back 13 for me. Darrell Henderson's RB20. Trey Sermon's RB31. But the thing with a Henderson and a Trey Sermon is that they both have ceilings. They both have more upside than what they're being valued at, or what I value them at as far as their rankings go too. Don't trade them both, because you're trading away at least one RB2, a valuable flex play who, when Raheem Mostert inevitably gets injured, and with the schedule that he has, could be an RB2, and if he turns into Alfred Morris, like I said, I think he might be, could potentially be a top 12 guy. That is in the realm of possibility for Trey Sermon. I like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I would not trade both of those guys for him, though. I've talked about this on many times on this show. I have problems with Clyde Edwards-Helaire's ability to score, ability to close. I question if he'll even have that role all season long, or we might see Darrell Williams take over as a goal line back in this Kansas City offense. He doesn't have any power at the goal line. He's not a game breaker either. He doesn't have the speed. While this offense is set up for him to be efficient and be productive, and he will be, he's not a guy who hits a ton of home runs. He's not a guy who scores a ton of touchdowns. So because of that reason, I'm not giving up two very valuable pieces for Clyde Edwards-Helaire personally. Nate, he asked me Trevor Lawrence or Jameis Winston. Trevor Lawrence. I mean, if we're talking, I'm assuming we're talking redraft leagues for this year. It's Trevor Lawrence. He has more weapons, more desperate volume, garbage time situations in his future, more rushing yard ceiling. Trevor Lawrence is my QB 9. Jameis Winston's in my 20s. It's definitely Trevor Lawrence for me. Last question, Earl. He asked me, sleeper tight end, Gerald Everett or Jared Cook? I have Jared Cook ranked ahead because, again, the reason is this. Cook could actually be the second best pass catcher because Mike Williams doesn't have the ability to stay healthy. So he's just higher up in the pecking order than a Gerald Everett is in a Seattle offense where you have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett established, and you have Chris Carson you have to deal with and all that. So Jared Cook to me is the sleeper tight end that I have ranked higher, although I do like both of them as sleeper tight ends, but I would lean towards Jared Cook myself. That's going to do it for the show, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed it. We're going to be back next week on social media at BellyUp MDFF Show and on the MD's Fantasy Football Show YouTube channel. Subscribe from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. on both Thursday and Friday. Similar to this, Chris will be with us on Thursday. We're going to preview the Thursday night games, the early afternoon Sunday games for week 1. We'll have a mailbag segment, of course. Starts to questions are always very popular during the season. We'll have our DMs wide open for you guys for that. Friday we'll come back. It'll just be me on the mic. We might have our intern Ben back. We'll see. I'll be recapping the Thursday night game, and I'll be going over the previews for the afternoon Sunday games, the late afternoon Sunday games, the Sunday night, and the Monday night game. Then we'll be back on Saturday with our DFS play and our bets of the week with Mr. Chaz Flaherty from championshipfootball.com. And again, all of this will be streamed to you live on social media at BellyUp MDFF Show and on the MD's Fantasy Football Show YouTube channel. Unhinged Sports Network will be live 6 to 7:30 on Thursday, right up until kickoff, basically. And then again on 6 to 7:30 p.m. on Friday, unhingedsn.airtime.pro. Our Saturday show will be live Sunday from 12 to 1 p.m. So up until kickoff on Sunday afternoon to help you guys win some money on Sunday afternoons. Then we'll be back Monday. We're going to recap all the Sunday afternoon games. Then we'll be back Tuesday. We're going to recap the Sunday night, the Monday night, and we'll go over the waiver wire report. Both those days, by the way, on the Unhinged Radio Network from 6 to 7:30 Monday and then from 7 to 8 on Tuesday. That's going to be the schedule throughout the entire season. So I hope you guys enjoyed the off-season content, but we're back, baby. We're here, and the MD's Fantasy Football Show is ready to rock and roll starting next week with the Week 1 preview. So we'll see you guys then. Everyone take care. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Good luck in your drafts. Remember, hit us up on social media if you need any help whatsoever.